Hi there, everybody. My name is Red Protocol, and today we're going to be doing a Gundam Evolution tier list right before Season 3 comes out, so this is some more sort of predictions. Before we start, you're probably wondering, who am I and why I should care about my opinion? Well, I'm a new type Gundam Evolution player. I think I'm ending the season around number 145, and I've been playing since launch. I've also played in a few tournaments, with my most recent placement being 3rd place at the most recent Gen L tournament. So, with that in mind, I'm going to go through the characters who have been changed this patch, and then I'm going to go through the other characters and where they fit in the meta. And lastly, I'm going to add Hyperion to this tier list, and we're going to see where he fits sort of in the meta. So, the first character we're going to talk about is GM. So, GM was buffed in this most recent patch. He gained 100 HP. His shield gained some more range on his shield bash, but because of the shield bash gaining range, the animation is a little bit longer. To be frank, I think GM is probably the worst character in the game right now, based off how I think the meta will sort of be after this patch is implemented and Hyperion is added into the game. Unfortunately, I think his ult is probably the second worst in the game, and the rest of his kit doesn't make up for his weak ult. His shield is pretty good, but he's a very small character, so the shield only protects himself. It doesn't protect anyone else on your team. His gun is also very weak when you compare it to other characters and their main weapons. It has a pretty low DPS overall, and a pretty slow fire rate, so it's not the greatest weapon in the game. While his heal grenade is pretty effective and strong, it's not enough. It's not enough to make up for the other weaknesses in his kit. Lastly, his Molly ability is just the worst version of Ashmar's Molly. There aren't too many situations in this game where you want to leave a bomb place and then blow it up later. So because of that, I'm going to put him in the D tier and rank him as the worst character currently in the game. Next, we're going to take a look at Ashmar. So Ashmar was actually buffed this most recent patch. His napalm damage is going from 17 to 22 per damage tick, and his cooldown has been reduced on his right-click charge shot. To be frank, Ashmar did not need these buffs whatsoever. He was already one of the strongest characters in the game. In fact, me and many of the other North American pros see him as an essential character on virtually every single map and situation in the game. This buff is absolutely insane, because not only is his napalm doing even more damage when it was already a very powerful ability, but this extra damage on his napalm is going to make it so that his ultimate is charging even faster. And while his ultimate is absolutely not one of the strongest in the game, it does have the ability to counter many of the other ultimates that people are going to use in this game. You can counter Turn A's Moonlight Butterfly, you can counter Pale Rider's Hades, and other ults with the ult from Ashmar. It also is very effective if the enemy is grouped up and can win you a team fight, even though it's not the best ult. Because of this, Ashmar is going to go in the X tier, which is just completely overpowered and should definitely be adjusted as soon as possible. Next, we're going to talk about Mahiru. So Mahiru was buffed significantly at the start of Season 2, and on certain maps, he was actually kind of oppressive. The extra detection range on his weapons and the higher damage was very powerful, and he became a actually not troll unit anymore. Unfortunately, he was nerfed in the mid-season patch, which reverted most of the buffs he received. Now, with this most recent patch for Season 3, Mahiru is going to be gaining some more detection range on his ultimate and his regular left click. Unfortunately, I really don't think that's enough to really save Mahiru. I think these buffs need to be a bit more significant for Mahiru to see more play. I do, however, think he is still viable on his super niche locations, being Harbor Town and I believe Missile Base, but still, Mahiru is going to be a pretty weak character overall. I'm going to throw him in the C tier. Next up is Marasai. And so people debate currently whether or not Marasai was buffed or nerfed with this most recent patch, because it was more of a rework. I'll tell you right now, I think it was a massive buff. Essentially what's happened is the cooldown has been reduced on his regular hook, but that regular hook has lost basically all of its damage. Meanwhile, the time to charge Marasai's ultimate has been reduced, and there's been some more knockback range on his staff attack. With this in mind, I think Marasai has been massively buffed. Before, Marasai was a character who would go for his hook, and if he missed it, he was essentially useless. Now, With your hook recharging so much faster, Marasai is going to be able to provide more per team fight. Even if getting a hook isn't an instant kill on your own, if your team is coordinated and paying attention, they'll be able to capitalize on your hooks. If you're able to get 2 hooks in a single fight with Marasai, that is going to be an insane amount of value. His ultimate was also incredibly strong. With his ultimate now being easier to charge, Marasai is probably going to be a lot stronger. I think the only issue with this most recent patch is that Marasai is countered by shields. Marasai's hook can't hook characters who are holding up shields, and Hyperion is a shield character, and not only is he a shield character, but he has 2 shields. The one saving grace for the Hyperion versus Marasai matchup is that Marasai can actually hook Hyperion out of his ult. Regardless, with this all in mind, I'm going to put Marasai in the A tier. I think if Marasai is against an enemy team that doesn't have many shields, I think Marasai is going to be incredibly strong with his most recent changes. However, if you're against a team with a lot of shields, you're probably better off switching to a character who is better and more capable at dealing with those shields. Speaking of a character who is capable of dealing with shields, we're going to talk about Zaku II Melee. So, Zaku II Melee has also received a bit of a rework, but it's more of a buff. Essentially, it's going to take 500 more points to charge his rage, but when rage is activated, all of your abilities, aside from your ultimate, are going to be stronger. This is overall a really good change for Zaku II Melee, who is a pretty niche character currently, in my opinion. Essentially, he takes a lot of resources to really see full value, because if he's not being healed properly, and people aren't peeling for him, he's going to take too much damage when his invulnerability isn't available, and he's going to die and not be able to pop his rage. I think, though, pre-patch, all of the resources you need to put into Zaku II Melee so that he would get his rage weren't really worth what rage provided. It just wasn't enough value. I do think with these changes, Zaku II Melee's rage, when popped, is going to be very threatening. Because of this, I think this buff has been pretty good for Zaku II Melee. This being said, I don't think this is enough to make him a strict meta character. I think he's something you pull out when the enemy team has a lot of shields and a Zaku II Melee can get a lot of value. Because of this, I'm going to put Zaku II Melee at the top of the B tier. And he's very strong against a comp that is vulnerable to him, but I think in general, he still isn't the pick you want to go with most of the time. Next, we're going to bring up New Gundam. So the New Gundam change in this most recent patch was not the biggest, but it's actually going to provide a lot if you play the character. So the change to New Gundam is that now you're going to have more movement speed while you're aiming down your sights. This is actually pretty significant because it's going to make it so that you're less vulnerable while you're aiming down your sights, and you're going to be able to do more damage in combat, but being able to effectively reposition while still firing in combat. Previously, when you'd have to hip fire in combat, New Gundam's hipfire was very poor. It was far worse than Gundam's and other characters' hipfire. I think pairing this with the strength of New Gundam's ultimate and his decent rocket dash ability, New Gundam is actually going to be in a pretty great spot on a few maps in the game. Even on maps you wouldn't think New Gundam's ult is the strongest, such as domination maps, he can still provide a ton of value. I've personally been limit testing this recently on my Twitch stream, which you can follow, and the link will be in the description. And I've found that New Gundam is actually very effective on a wide variety of maps in the game. Because of this, I'm actually going to throw New Gundam in the A tier above Marasai. I think he can provide a lot of value in the team. The next unit that has been changed in this upcoming patch is Zaku II Ranged. So Zaku II Ranged is a very big nuisance if you play against him, but on his own, he doesn't really provide enough value in a team fight. This most recent change has made it so when Zaku II Ranged pops his smoke ability, he's going to gain a boost charge. So what this means is that before, when you charge in, fire your gun, and then pop your smoke, you wouldn't be able to escape very easily. Now, you're going to have an extra boost dash, which should let you be able to escape these situations. This is going to make Zaku II Ranged far more of a nuisance. He's going to be able to come in, shoot his gun, pump out a ton of quick damage, and then be able to escape without much consequence. I think this is a pretty big change for Zaku II Ranged, but I don't think it's enough to make him overpowered or strictly a part of the new meta. Because of this, I'm going to throw him in the B tier under Zaku II Melee. I think he's pretty powerful, but like I said, I don't think this change is enough to make him overpowered or so strong that you must pick him. Next, we're going to talk about the last character who was changed, and that is Turn A. Turn A had a straight nerf. His grab does less damage now, going from 400 to 250. This means that there are multiple characters in the game who, when you grab, you won't be able to one-shot kill anymore. Well, I didn't think this was the biggest nerf at first. I've been talking to some Turn A one tricks, and they were telling me that this is absolutely devastating. Keeping in mind, though, that he still has an incredibly strong rifle that is fantastic at long ranges, and the strongest ultimate ability in the game with his Moonlight Butterfly. I think when you keep that all in mind, even though his grab was nerfed, he's going to be okay. I'm going to throw him in the B tier, below Zaku II melee, but is above Zaku II ranged. Now, we're done characters who have been affected personally by the patch, so now we're going to talk about characters who are going to be affected due to the meta shifts that this patch is going to cause. First up is Barbados. So, with more shields being added, melee characters are essentially being buffed because they don't care about shields. Barbados is a pretty niche pick. I think the value he provides is pretty limited because if he's not assassinating a target, he's basically not really doing anything. This being said, his ultimate when charged is one of the strongest in the game, and when he does get an assassination, it is very valuable. All the damage Barbados does provide is basically kill damage, so it's really valuable damage. I think with this in mind, I'm going to throw him in the B tier, above Zaku II ranged, but below Turn A and Zaku II melee. A good Barbados can provide a ton of value to the team, but when Barbados isn't really hitting, it really isn't hitting. Next, we're going to talk about Dom Trooper. I think it's pretty criminal that Dom Trooper wasn't changed in this most recent patch. Dom Trooper is the strongest character in the game. He's the most picked character in pro play for both North America and Japan. And lastly, he has one of the best ultimates in the game. His rockets do far too much damage and he has too many of them. His armor is a fantastic ability that is severely underrated when you talk about his kit. His ultimate is incredibly strong at helping your team win team fights. And lastly, he also has mines because why not give him even more abilities? Dom Trooper is going to go in the overpowered and needs a nerf tier. I'm actually going to put him above Ashmar, which might be wrong, but I think right now Dom Trooper is stronger than Ashmar, even with the buffs he's receiving. Next, we're going to talk about Axia. So, Axia was nerfed in the mid-season Season 2 patch, but he hasn't received any changes in this most recent patch. So, where do I think Axia sits now? Well, like I said with Barbados, the more shields that are in the game, the better melee characters like Axia are going to fare, because they get to ignore their shields with their melee abilities. This being said, Axia's previously very strong poke has been very nerfed, and this has reduced his damage output significantly. Still, he's incredibly hard to deal with due to his thin hitbox and tons of movement abilities, and also is able to combo out a lot of damage with just his abilities, not including his left click. His ultimate also makes him a very large threat and something that if you don't deal with and focus, that can wipe your team out. With all of this in mind, I'm going to put him in the A tier above Marasai, but below New Gundam. Next up, we're talking about GM Sniper. GM Sniper is negatively affected by more shields because they get in his way when he's trying to snipe. This being said though, GM Sniper is an odd character because he's really only good on a few maps. On the maps GM Sniper is good on, he is absolutely fantastic and belongs in the S tier. Unfortunately, on maps he's not good on, he's the worst character in the game in my opinion. With all this in mind, I think I'm going to put him right in the middle in the B tier. I'm going to throw him above Barbados, but below Turn A. Sniper has his niche maps where he is incredibly strong. I think more shields does slightly hurt him, but I don't think it really matters. In the end, he's just a niche pick that's only good on a few maps. Next up is the Grandpa Gundam. So, Gundam here has an incredibly strong left-click main gun ability. But he was nerfed in the mid-season patch, losing shield health and an increased cooldown on his flail. His flail is still a very valuable ability that provides a ton to a team in a team fight. But his survivability has been hurt due to the nerf on his shield. Also, his ultimate is still the weakest ultimate in the game. Keeping all of this in mind, I'm going to throw him in the B tier, above Turn A but below Zaku II melee. Gundam is still very, very strong and you can do work with him in ranked. But I do think that Gundam overall has been pretty significantly weakened by those recent patches. And I think that his ultimate being very poor really does hurt him as a character. Next, we're going to talk about Guntank. So Guntank is a very weird character because he seems like the baby sort of tutorial character, but he has a really significant passive ability known as Revive. So the way his Revive works is that once every 12 seconds, you're able to get a Revive at double the speed. This means with a Guntank on your team, you're able to res mid-combat. If a Guntank can get one of these reses off mid-combat, it provides an insane amount of value. It is fight winning. This being said, it's still difficult to do this if the other team focuses on making sure they're finishing bodies. Guntank is also going to be negatively affected by the addition of Hyperion because more shields means more things blocking his spam of bullets. While his damage output is actually decent when he's firing into a crowd, his damage is sort of the opposite of Barbados. While Barbados damage is all part of securing a kill, Guntank's damage is often just sort of spread out and not exactly as effective. When you're doing damage to a large range of targets, one target isn't being focused down. This means that there's still a bunch of enemies outputting damage, whereas if another character is shooting at them, maybe that other character dies, and therefore there's only 2 enemies shooting out at damage at that point. With this all in mind, I'm going to throw Guntank at the top of the C tier above Mahiru. Next up is Methus. Methus is the current strongest healer in the game. His ultimate, the Cable Charge, provides a ton of value when you combo it with other strong ultimates, like Dom Trooper Ult or Pale Rider Hades. His turret provides a decent amount of damage and can be annoying for the other team. His Twin Shot provides an actual lot of damage when you land it properly. And his healing with his right click is very, very powerful and the best single target heal in the game. Methus isn't really going to feel too affected by the addition of Hyperion, and because of that, I'm going to put him at the top of the A tier. He's a very effective healer, he's good in every single map, and he's just very strong in the current meta. Next up, we're talking about Pale Rider. Pale Rider is the basic character of this game. He has the assault rifle, he does really good damage, and he has a very powerful ultimate. His ultimate Hades is one of the strongest in the game and is very capable of wiping an enemy team. Pairing it with Methus ult is one of the most deadly combos you can think of in the game. Pale Rider is also equipped with Healing Station, and while it was nerfed at the launch of Season 2, it still is an heal ability on a strong DPS character. Healing in this game is far weaker than other hero shooters, so this ability is incredibly helpful. With this all in mind, I'm going to throw Pale Rider in the S tier. He is very, very strong, but I don't think he's in the same place Ashmar and Dom Trooper are where he needs to be nerfed. I think if Pale Rider wasn't touched again, he'd probably remain in the meta, but I don't think people would deem him as incredibly overpowered. Next up, we're going to talk about Sazabi. So Sazabi is the only real tank in this game. He has a 1400 HP shield, a ton of HP on his own body, he has an axe that provides CC, he has a shotgun that can kill enemies in 2 to 3 hits at close range, he has a scan that provides a ton of value in a team fight, and lastly, he has an ultimate, which while not the strongest on its own, if he's able to survive an entire team fight with it up, will actually output quite a bit of damage. Sazabi is kind of hurt by Hyperion's existence technically, but I don't think they're gonna sort of take each other's spot. I think instead, Hyperion might just be also on teams with Sazabi. With that in mind, I'm gonna throw Sazabi at the top of the A tier above Methus. I think Sazabi provides a ton of value to teams. I think basically every team comp should have a Sazabi. Lastly, we're going to talk about Unicorn. Unicorn is the other sort of main healing character in the game, but unlike Methus, who provides single target healing, Unicorn provides passive AoE healing and an AoE armor ability. Unicorn is best utilized on maps where you're going to be grouping up a lot with your team and you can get the most out of his AoE healing. Unicorn also does a good amount of damage when you compare it with the other healer, Methus. His funnels are very good damage, and his rifle provides quite a bit of damage if you're able to land a lot of headshots consistently. Lastly, his ultimate also is able to get a ton of damage off if you land your shots and are positioning well. With this all in mind, I'm going to throw Unicorn at the bottom of the A tier. So, if you haven't noticed, Hyperion's not in here yet. So we're going to add Hyperion now. I'm going to try and put out some thoughts of where I think Hyperion's going to land in the meta. So Hyperion Gundam is coming in and providing 2 shield abilities. One is a personal shield, but it only has 700 HP, unlike Sazabi's 1400 shield HP. Next, we have his secondary shield, which has its own unit of measurement, but it seems like it still doesn't last very long. Next, he has a slight damaging ability, kind of like New Gundam's funnels, but probably a little bit better. And lastly, he has a charge ultimate that CCs any enemies he catches, but while in his ultimate, he is completely vulnerable and is able to be CC'd himself. I think a lot of the strength of New Gundam is going to depend on the numbers that come out regarding his abilities and his main weapon, the SMG. I think currently, without the numbers in mind, he's going to be a low A tier character. I think there are going to be certain niche scenarios where Hyperion Gundam is incredibly valuable. With that being said, I do think his lack of 1v1 potential and the weakness of his 2 shield abilities, and the fact that his ultimate can be very easily countered by simply shooting him or CCing him, is going to leave Hyperion Gundam in a weird spot where he's not able to tank effectively on his own, but as a secondary tank, he isn't exactly strong enough. Because of this, I'm going to put him in the low A tier below Unicorn. That's the end of my Gundam Evolution Season 3 prediction tier list. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said earlier, if you're interested, I live stream on Twitch occasionally. The link to that is in the description. I also tweet on Twitter, so if you want to see me tweet, you can go find links to that in the description. Thanks for watching this video. Have a good day.